What's up, everyone? Jeremy Gerard from Mythic Customs here with one of my short customizing tutorial videos. Today we're going to talk about using custom torsos on your Mythic Legions figure. So this is something that I've been seeing more and more of the third-party companies starting to come out with, these custom 3D printed torsos. And the reality is they're super cool. They add so much to your customs, but they are a little bit more difficult to use than just, say, like a custom head. So anyone that's done Mythic Legions customizing, and certainly even those who are not, customizers, but who buy the painted versions of the heads, popping those onto Mythic Legions figures is pretty darn easy. And they've done it for quite a while now, so you're probably pretty familiar with how to do that. But when you deal with torsos, there are definitely some things that you should know because they're not as straightforward as using these heads. So I've used a number of 3D printed torsos over the months and years that I've been customizing. I've got a couple examples to show you, some photos of some things I've done, and then I've actually got a couple pieces here that I'm gonna show right on camera and talk to you about some of the things that I've noticed, give you some tips that you can use to make sure you use them effectively in your customs. Cool, let's get started. So the first torso that I want to show is one that I really loved being able to use because it very much filled a need, a void that a lot of customizers were asking for, and that was for a Heavyset Dwarf. So Saba and Julie from Planetary Dog Toys, they created this really cool Heavyset torso that they were able to use, and it works wonderfully on the Mythic Legions 1.0 dwarf style body. The stomach kind of fits right on top of the waist armor, and it makes for a really cool looking character. So let me show you exactly what I'm talking about here. I created my dwarven bard with this character. I figured that if a dwarf was going to be a bard, he would be a bagpiper. So I created this character. Obviously, has a very Scottish type feel to it, but you can see here that it's a really cool body, that torso that adds such a different kind of look to this figure. Now, the thing that you should know about this is all of these parts that I'm going to show today, they're all printed using, resin. They're all 3D printed using resin. And there's a big difference between the consistency and the flexibility of resin versus regular plastic. So if you look at a normal Mythic Legions figure, I have one right here. So I've got a body from Purplore right here. This particular figure is made with plastery from the factory. There's give to this. So all of these pieces that pop in, whether it's the waist piece, whether it's the arm pieces, there's some nice flexibility that those can pop in. So even if there's a little bit of a variance in the figure itself, and as someone who has customized these for years, I can tell you that there are definitely variances from figure to figure. Even though they use the same body parts from wave to wave, we've seen this bare chest since Mythic Legions 1.0, these bare arms. I can tell you that I've combined chests and arms and so forth from various ways, and even though they are in theory the same part, they do fit together slightly differently. But they work because of the variances in the plastic. They can still pop them together. Resin is not as forgiving. So it is really, really hard to make any of these resin parts, any of these custom torsos that are going to fit perfectly. So that's one of the things you want to realize is these are meant for customizers. If you're looking to recreate exactly this, you're going to be disappointed with these custom torsos because they are not the same kind of material. That particular, large dwarf, for instance, that Heavyset Dwarf, when I got that, I actually had a bit of a hard time getting it on to the actual waist peg. And it's all about that flexibility, right? So if I separate this figure here, you can see that the way this works is it's got this really, really round ball. And that round ball goes into this socket here. It obviously needs to be a tight fit for it to be able to, go together and not be super, super floppy. It's got to be pretty tight. The problem is with resin, if you make it that tight, what's going to happen is as you try to push it in, it ends up breaking. Okay. Now, there are also different kinds of resin. So one thing that I would mention to you is if you buy any of these 3D parts, talk to the actual creators of those parts. Talk to the printers. This is something I mentioned in my previous video about using 3D printed parts. Depending on the kind of resin they use, for instance, some printers use resin that if you heat it up with, a hot air, some hot air from like a hot hair dryer, it gives it a little bit of flexibility that will make it easier to connect parts. Now, I actually tried doing that on the piece from Planetary Dog Toys, and I did it before asking Saba and Julie, and Saba informed me after the fact that no, the resin they use, or at least the resin they used on that particular part certainly, was not heat sensitive. So heating it up didn't do anything. In fact, it actually might have weakened the integrity of it a little bit. When I popped it on, I actually broke the part. Now, I broke it in a really minor way. It's a little piece on the inside that you never actually see. Actually made it easier for me to put it in place. But one of the things that I was able to do, that I had to do, was to keep it tight, was use a little bit of an adhesive. And I'm going to talk about that in a few minutes. So that's the first thing I'm going to caution you is set your expectations properly when you use these pieces. They're not going to fit and snap together and be as tight as a factory part. And that is not only at the waist, that is at the arms as well. You may need to do something to adhere them a little bit tighter. And these pieces that you are using are probably best used as display pieces, not as something that you're going to be taking out and posing a lot and taking photography of. Not that you can't do that, you just got to be a little more careful with that. Okay? The next piece I'm going to show is actually a variation on the one I just did. So after Planetary Dog Toys did that, Heavyset Torso for the 1.0 style figures, they blew it up and they actually did it at ogre scale. And it's a wonderful piece. This is actually one of my favorite customs I've done because it just has so much personality. This is my hill giant, or hill half giant, I guess, because giants would be even larger. But this uses not only that large torso from Planetary Dog Toys, but it also uses a wonderful head that they did as well. And I use that to create this character. Again, it adds a level of personality, a level of customization that you just simply cannot get with the existing Mythic Legions parts. They haven't, at least at this point, given us a large torso like this. So it definitely is cool that it adds, that little bit of something extra. And here he is. I've got this guy with me right now. He's, again, one of my favorite figures in the case. He makes such an imposing character. This one actually went on pretty well. The arms clicked in. There's no adhesive on the arms, and the arms, you can see that I can hold the arms up and they maintain their position. So they're nice and tight. If I wouldn't flip this over. I mean, it is pretty solid, but there you go. It's not too bad. It is nice and tight. It is held together. But once again, whenever you use these parts, just be aware that they are 3D printed resin. They are going to be a bit more fragile. Another one that I used from Planetary Dog Toys, and I'm obviously showing a lot of their parts. They're one of the creators that has really embraced doing the torso. There's a lot of other 3D companies that have really focused on heads, maybe accessories. Certainly, you may know that I do a lot of work with Wolf King. Wolf King, up until now, hasn't done any torsos. I've got a few that they're going to be doing in the future, but they've focused on some other parts. Planetary Dog Toys, they're one of the companies that have really embraced doing the custom torsos, and I've used a number of them, so it was relevant for what I'm talking about today. Let me show another one that I have here. This was one that I did where I wanted to do like a dark knight type character, like an evil fallen knight. And this was one that they have. Again, really cool body. This particular one, I found it a little bit hard to use the body with the waist armor. So the custom, it worked great for what I wanted, because the custom that I was doing used a little bit of a waist piece from a Lord of the Rings figure. So I didn't need the standard Mythic Legions armor. It absolutely does fit. Don't think it doesn't actually connect. It fits well. It's just trying to get a tight fit. That little bit of extra plastic from the waist armor the standard Mythic Legions waist armor made it a little bit tight for me to actually clip it together. So I pulled it out to make a tighter connection, and I ended up liking the way it looked. Same thing with the arms on this one. This particular one, the arms weren't as tight when I put them in as the Hill Giant I just showed, but that is just proof, talking about what I mentioned earlier, that the variances in how these actual parts are created at the factory makes it so, the resin is not perfectly accurate every time. There's going to be variances. There's also variances in the actual figure parts. So when you put all those variances together, you're definitely going to have some that fit better than others. Now, I do have a couple parts here that I want to look at, and I said I'd give you some tips. So I have a few pieces that are going to be offered by Wolf King Customs, and really, really cool stuff. I've got one piece that was sculpted by Emil Wickman and one piece by Walter DeMarco. And one of them is actually a 1.0 piece, one of them is a 2.0. So I've got the 1.0 piece here, and I'll show you what I've got. This is actually a crazy, crazy torso that I got a test print of. It's a forearm torso. This was something, if you checked out the Mythic Conversations and Wolf King Customs holiday special that we broadcast back in December, this was one of the teaser pieces that Walter showed. Really, really cool piece. But if I pop this in here, so I separate this figure. Once again, you've got that ball type shape here. This is designed to fit right in there. So I pop this on, and now I'm going to just pop this piece right on. And what you're going to see is it goes on, it's loose. It's not crazy, but it's definitely loose. It's not as tight as what you had right here. And if I pop in the arms, pop these arms off. By the way, if you're ever separating any of these pieces and you get any resistance, I pull these apart all the time, so I'm pretty comfortable working with them. If you're ever trying to pull something apart and it's resisting, don't force it. That is certainly a recipe for breaking it. My suggestion is hit it with a little heat, get a hot air dryer, hair dryer type thing, blow it with some hot air for 20, 30 seconds. That will be enough to soften the plastic, make it more malleable, allow you to pull these pieces out. But this as well, if I pop this arm into the joint here, let's see. See, it's really, really tight. Really, really tight. So these are things that you might have to mess with these a little bit. You might have to maybe take a Dremel in there and widen it a little bit. There we go. I popped it in. Now it's nice and tight. So that's really, really nice and tight. Now, but this is a little bit loose. So how would I tighten that? There's a couple different things you can do. The first thing you can do is just the good old blue tack. So if you've seen me talk about using the 3D printed heads, I talk about how those heads are often made with a neck port that is larger than the neck ball on a Mythic Legions torso. What I always suggest you do is you take a little piece of this blue putty, and this is just putty that I get off of Amazon. It's made for like hanging posters on walls. The brand I use is by Loctite. That's Loctite. I use Loctite blue putty, or blue tack is what I often call it. It's like $2 for a package. It'll last you a while. But what I do with the heads is I just kind of put it on top of that ball, and then you put the head on top, and it allows for movement still, but this is nice and sticky. You can do the exact same principle here with the waist piece as well. You can put a little bit of blue tack on, and you only need a little bit, and that will tighten it up a little bit. The other thing that you can use is actually this. So this is plumbing tape. So this is this kind of like tape, and it comes in a couple different colors. This one is white. I have gray as well. But this is the kind of like plumbing tape that you'll use where if you've got a leaking pipe and you don't want to call a plumber, you can wrap this around that leak, and it gives you a little bit of time before you have to get it repaired. I'm not a plumber, so take my advice for what it's worth. I'm customizing action figures, not fixing plumbing right here. But if you use this is really, really thin, really, really fine. You can actually wrap this around joints and give it just a little bit of extra a little bit of extra size to make it tighter. I've actually been using this a lot on like Mythic Legion's feet. So a lot of the feet that I've been doing with Wolf King Customs, like for the wolves and for the rabbits that are coming up, if those feet don't fit perfectly, I like to wrap a little bit of this around that foot peg, even maybe put a little dab of glue on the wrapped foot peg and then put it in the foot. Makes a really, really nice connection, really tight connection. And you can do that here as well to tighten that up. The next one I'm going to look at here is actually a 2.0 body. So this is the Goblin Thump. And this torso is from Emil Wickman. So this is one that he did recently that should be coming out soon. Little crazy goblin torso, and I'm going to attach this. Now, the first thing that you should realize is when you pull apart a 2.0 figure and you look at that waist peg, it's totally different. Instead of having that rounded ball, it's just a straight peg. So these are going to connect very, very differently. I'm going to pop the arms off this as well, so I can use the arms on this figure, and I'm going to pop the head off too. So first things first, I'm going to pop this on, and this is even easier to attach. Now, when I've done the 1.0 bodies, most of the torsos that have come out so far have all been 1.0. So they have to go around that ball. This is a much easier connection. It just really slides right on, but it's good and bad. It slides right on, so it's really easy to do. I'm certainly not afraid I'm going to break it, but there's nothing to adhere it. It's not, you will have to do something with this. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take just a little bit of this blue putty. I'm going to put that blue putty right on that peg right there. So you can see, just put a little bit of that blue putty. And then now when I put this on, you just want a little bit, because this honestly fits so nice and tight, that so nice and snug, I should say. It's not tight, it's nice and really, really designed for it, that you don't want there to be too much. But now you can see that just that little bit of blue putty absolutely holds it in place. Okay, that's all you need. It's all you need. So if you get one of these, any of these torsos, and they don't go on immediately, it's a very, very easy fix. Now I'm going to attach the arms, and same thing. The arms, it stays in. Oh, no, it doesn't stay in. Sorry about that. So again, super, super easy fix. And this one, you know what I'm going to do? Instead of using the blue putty, I'm going to use this plumbing tape here. So I'm just going to pull off a little piece. Put that down. I'm just going to wrap that plumbing tape right around this peg, okay? And the nice thing about this little tape here, this plumbing tape, is it literally comes right off when you're done. You don't have to worry about it. The putty can get a little messy. It can kind of get in crevices and stuff and make it hard to get out. So just put a little bit of that putty, that tape around there. Now when I plug it in, it's much tighter, okay? Much, much, much tighter. Super, super easy to do. Again, it's not going to hold up if you try to pose this thing a lot. These pieces are going to disconnect. You will have to reconnect them. But for putting them on display, if you paint this up, take some photos of it, put it on display, you should be fine. Let's add that head. Head snaps on really, really nice and tight. And oh, so there you go. See, like I said, I was just telling you that if you mess around with it too much, those parts will fall off. Again, a little bit of, even if I put a little bit of dab of glue like I do for the feet there, that would help adhere that in there. So those are just some tips that I've seen for using these torsos. To kind of recap, have your expectations set properly when you get these things. They're definitely different than using heads. The heads pop right on. The heads with just that little bit of blue putty, you'd still get all the movement you need. The torsos are different because they have to connect to the hips, they have to connect to the arms, they have to connect to the head. So there's so many more points of potential failure in there, and it is just not going to be a perfect fit. Okay, so you've got to, if you buy these, remember, we're talking about Mythic Legions customizing. So you can't be afraid to do some customizing. Even if you're buying one of these pieces painted, be prepared that you might have to do some slight modifications with the putty or with that plumbing tape or what have you to get the pieces to fit perfectly. But if you're willing to do that, if you're comfortable doing that, you can make some incredibly cool pieces. Here's another piece that's going to be coming up soon from Walter DeMarco and Wolf King Customs, the last piece that I'll share and show you. Absolutely love this piece. And this is a full-on skeleton torso. This is another piece that Walter showed during the holiday special on my channel. I know a lot of people have clamored for a full-on skeleton torso. I know that I've wanted one for a while. This is certainly going to be a popular piece. But once again, if you are going to use this, and this is sized for 1.0 figures, if you are going to use this, be prepared to do a little bit of customization work. If you enjoyed the video, please give the video a like. Let me know in the comments if you have any questions. And if you're not already subscribed to the channel, consider doing so. It helps me out, and it allows you to be notified whenever I decide to go live with a video like this. So until next time, I can't wait to see what you